The Zephyrians especially got a kick out of our ships. No shields, they'd wheeze through their respiratory slits, just armor plating and, what do you call those projectile weapons again? Kinetic interceptors. They'd break into what passed for laughter among their species, a sound like grinding metal that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Commander Sarah Chin of the UES Nightborne had heard that laughter before. Sitting in the captain's chair of humanity's newest and most classified vessel, she remembered every condescending chuckle, every dismissive gesture from the Galactic Defense Council meetings. The Nightborne wasn't like other human ships. While most of our fleet relied on tried-and-true kinetic weapons and nuclear propulsion, the Nightborne was different, experimental. The kind of different that made even human engineers nervous. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the sensor station, his voice tight with controlled tension. "We've got confirmation on Zephyrian fleet positions. 12 dreadnoughts, 46 cruisers, and what looks like 130 smaller craft. They've formed a blockade around the Kepler colony." Chin nodded, her fingers drumming against the armrest. Kepler colony, 30,000 human civilians, including about 8,000 kids. The Zephyrians had given them an ultimatum: surrender and become a protectorate, fancy alien speak for slaves, or be reduced to radioactive dust. Earth's response had been typically human: thanks, but we'll pass. Now, you might think 12 dreadnoughts against one experimental human ship sounds like pretty bad odds. And you'd be right. Under normal circumstances, the Nightborne wouldn't last 30 seconds against that kind of firepower. But here's where things get interesting. The Nightborne wasn't designed for normal circumstances. Orders from command just came through, Shin announced to her crew, her voice carrying that particular tone that made experienced soldiers check their life insurance policies. "We are authorized to deploy the Erebus protocol." The bridge went dead silent. Even the soft hum of the life support system seemed to pause. "Ma'am," Rodriguez whispered, "are you sure? The last simulation vaporized a small asteroid." Chin cut him off. "Today we find out what it does to alien warships." Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's chief science officer and the man who designed the Erebus system, looked up from his console with the expression of someone who'd created fire and was about to hand it to a pyromaniac. "Captain, I have to remind you that we've never tested the system against active targets. The energy displacement could what, Doc? End this war in the next 5 minutes, or blow us all to hell trying." Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Either way sounds better than watching 30,000 people get turned into space dust. What the aliens didn't know, what nobody outside of the Nightborne's crew knew, was that humanity had cracked something the galactic community considered impossible: dark matter manipulation. Not the theoretical physics kind of manipulation that let you build fancy engines or gravity wells. The weaponized kind. The Nightborne dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a ghost materializing from the void. One moment, empty space. The next, a sleek black vessel that seemed to drink in the light of the local star. "Passive sensors only," Chin ordered. "Let's see what we're working with before we announce ourselves." The tactical display painted a grim picture. The Zephyrian fleet had arranged itself in a perfect siege formation around Kepler's inhabited moon, their ships glowing with the telltale heat signatures of charged weapons. They weren't just blockading, they were preparing for bombardment. "Energy readings off the charts," Rodriguez reported. "They're charging their main batteries. Estimate 12 minutes until they open fire." 12 minutes. 12 minutes to save 30,000 lives. You know what's funny about superior alien technology? It's really predictable. Zephyrian tactical doctrine, Shin mused, pulling up historical battle data on her personal display. Always the same pattern. Maintain formation integrity, maximize overlapping fields of fire, rely on superior firepower to overwhelm the enemy. She paused. They've never fought an enemy that could turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. "Beginning Erebus system initialization," Dr. Webb announced, his fingers dancing across controls that hadn't existed 5 years ago. "Dark matter collectors are cycling up. Gravitational lensing array is online. Captain, once we start this process, there's no going back." The energy signature will light us up like a Christmas tree. Good, Chin said. I want them to see us coming. The Nightborne began its approach, accelerating toward the Zephyrian fleet with the lazy confidence of a shark swimming toward a school of fish. At this distance, they probably looked like just another human ship, brave, stupid, and about to become space debris. That illusion lasted exactly 47 seconds. We're being hailed, the communications officer reported. It's Admiral Thexvoren himself. Chin raised an eyebrow. Thexvoren, the Zephyrian commander who'd earned the nickname Planet Cracker, after what he'd done to the rebellious mining colonies in the Vega system. Getting a personal call from him was like receiving a death threat written in calligraphy. Put him through, Chin ordered. This should be fun. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular, insectoid features of a Zephyrian admiral. Thexvoren's compound eyes glittered with amusement, and his mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was their version of condescending laughter. The humans send a single ship. Thexvoren's translator rendered his clicking speech into crisp English. How quaint. I am Admiral Thexvoren of the Imperial Third Fleet. You will surrender immediately, or I will demonstrate why your species should have stayed in their primitive system, playing with fire and crude metals. Chin leaned back in her chair, adopting the casual posture of someone who'd just been threatened by a particularly aggressive chihuahua. Admiral, I'm Captain Chin of the UES Nightborne. Thanks for the warm welcome, but I'm afraid we're going to have to decline your generous offer of surrender. The alien's mandibles stopped clicking. You dare mock me, human? Mock you? Admiral, I wouldn't dream of it. I'm sure you're very intimidating to species that fight fair. Chen's smile could have powered a small star. Unfortunately for you, we're human. Fair isn't really our thing. What happened next would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years. Erebus system at full power, Dr. Webb announced. Dark matter cascade is stable. Gravitational lensing array locked onto target cluster. The space around the Nightborne began to change. Reality seemed to bend and twist, as if the fabric of spacetime itself was being gathered into invisible folds. The star's light bent at impossible angles, creating a halo of distorted brilliance around the human ship. What in the name of the void? Thexvoren's transmission cut to static as every sensor in the Zephyrian fleet went haywire. You see, the thing about dark matter is that it makes up most of the universe, but nobody really understands it. The aliens had theories, models, and very pretty equations that described how it should behave. Humans had something better, the willingness to poke it with a stick and see what happened. Target acquired, Chin announced, her voice cutting through the bridge like a blade. All Zephyrian vessels in formation. Dr. Webb, you may fire when ready. Firing, Webb said quietly. Nothing happened. At least, nothing visible happened. For a heartbeat, the universe held its breath. The Zephyrian fleet continued its advance, weapons charging, commanders probably laughing at whatever light show the crazy humans were putting on. Then reality hiccuped. The dark matter cascade hit the Zephyrian formation like the fist of an angry god. One moment, 12 massive dreadnoughts were cruising through space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of 8 centuries of military dominance. The next moment, they weren't. Oh, they were still there, sort of. But the space around them had become something else entirely. Dark matter, compressed and weaponized, created pockets of gravitational distortion that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. The first dreadnought, the pride of Zephyria, simply folded in on itself. Not crushed, folded like origami made from starship-grade alloy. Its hull plates bent at angles that shouldn't exist, its reactor core twisted into a Klein bottle of superheated plasma that burned in colors that had no names. The second ship tried to fire its engines, only to discover that thrust and acceleration had become optional. It spun helplessly through space, its crew probably experiencing the unique sensation of being in 17 different places at once. But the real masterpiece was what happened to the third dreadnought. Its forward section accelerated to near light speed while its rear remained stationary, creating a starship that existed in several different time zones simultaneously. The crew probably aged a few decades in the span of a heartbeat, while their coffee was still cooling in the cups they'd left behind in the past. Jesus Christ, Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered, staring at the sensor readings that shouldn't have been possible. Captain, what did we just do? We reminded the galaxy why humans are dangerous, Chin replied, watching as the Zephyrian fleet ceased to exist as a coherent force. Not because we're stronger or faster or smarter, but because when we don't understand something, we don't just study it. She paused, her eyes reflecting the impossible light show playing out across the tactical display. We weaponize it. The aftermath was quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a job well done, but the profound cosmic silence of a universe trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Where the mighty Zephyrian Third Fleet had been, there was now a graveyard of twisted metal and impossible geometry. Some ships had been compressed into perfect spheres. Others had been stretched across several light minutes of space like metallic spaghetti. A few had simply stopped existing in any meaningful way, leaving behind spaces where reality wore thin. The only sounds on the Nightborne's bridge were the soft hum of life support and the occasional beep from systems that were probably having existential crises. Casualty report, Chin ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. All Zephyrian vessels neutralized, Rodriguez replied, his voice hollow with disbelief. No survivors detected. No distress calls. No. Anything. Dr. Webb looked up from his console, his face pale. Captain, the gravitational distortions are stabilizing, but we've created permanent alterations in spacetime. This area is going to be marked as a navigation hazard for the next few millennia. What about Kepler colony? Safe, Rodriguez confirmed. No damage to the colony or civilian ships. The cascade effect was perfectly contained to the military targets. Chin nodded, trying to process what they'd accomplished. In less than 5 minutes, they'd eliminated an entire alien fleet without firing a single conventional weapon. The Zephyrians hadn't just been defeated, they'd been erased so thoroughly that their empire would probably spend the next century trying to figure out where their third fleet had gone. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was interesting. Representatives from dozens of species packed the Great Assembly Hall on Station Harmony, their various appendages, tentacles, and communication organs buzzing with barely contained panic. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed the last known position of the Zephyrian Third Fleet, or rather, the bizarre spacetime anomaly that had once been the Zephyrian Third Fleet. Ambassador Williams stood at the human podium, looking like a man who'd been asked to explain why his pet dragon had accidentally burned down the neighbor's house. The Galactic Council recognizes the human representative, the council speaker announced, its translation device rendering the aliens' clicks and whistles into formal English. Thank you, Williams said, straightening his tie. I'd like to begin by saying that the recent incident in the Kepler system was purely defensive in nature. A cacophony of alien voices erupted from the gallery. Through the translation chaos, you could make out phrases like violation of the warfare conventions, crimes against physics, and what the actual hell was that? The Zephyrian representative, Ambassador Klex Theron, rose from his delegation's pod. His entire exoskeleton was trembling with barely contained rage. The humans have violated every principle of civilized warfare. They have deployed weapons that. He paused, his translator struggling with concepts that apparently didn't exist in any known language. That work, Williams suggested helpfully. The Third Fleet didn't just die, Klex Theron continued, his voice rising to a screech. They were unmade, turned inside out, scattered across dimensions that don't even exist. Williams nodded sympathetically. Yes, we've reviewed the battle recordings. Very unfortunate. Of course, this could have been avoided if your fleet hadn't been preparing to commit genocide against 30,000 civilians. That was a legitimate military operation. Against children, Williams cut him off, his diplomatic smile never wavering. Against human children. The chamber fell silent. Even the usually chattering Gassarian delegation stopped their constant whispered commentary. The Galactic Council should understand something about humanity, Williams continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. We have many flaws. We're loud, we're messy, and we have an unfortunate tendency to turn scientific breakthroughs into weapons of mass destruction. He paused, letting that sink in. But we are very, very protective of our children. All children, actually. And when someone threatens them, he gestured to the holographic display showing the space-time anomaly. Well, you've seen what happens. The real shock came 3 days later, when the Zephyrian Empire issued a formal statement. The proud 800-year-old empire that had conquered half the spiral arm issued an unconditional surrender to humanity. Not to the Galactic Council, not to some alliance of species, but specifically to the Terran Republic and its associated colonies. The statement was broadcast across every communication network in known space. The Zephyrian Empire formally acknowledges the military superiority of human forces and requests immediate cessation of hostilities. We offer full reparations for any damages caused to human civilian populations and pledge to withdraw all military forces from human-claimed space. It was signed by the Zephyrian Emperor himself. Ambassador Williams received the message while having breakfast in his quarters aboard Station Harmony. He read it 3 times, put down his coffee, and called Earth. "Sir," he said to the Secretary General, "I think we might have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Williams looked out his window at the stream of alien ships fleeing the station. Diplomatic vessels, cargo haulers, and anything else that could make the jump to hyperspace. In the distance, he could see the navigation beacons marking the Kepler anomaly zone, where reality still wore thin and physics professors throughout the galaxy were having nervous breakdowns. "The kind where everyone in the galaxy is suddenly terrified of us," Williams replied. "The Zephyrian surrender was just the beginning. I'm getting reports of trade embargoes being lifted, territorial disputes being resolved in our favor, and at least 3 species asking if they can become human protectorates." There was a long pause from Earth. "Ambassador," the Secretary General finally said, "what exactly did the Nightborne do out there?" Williams pulled up the classified battle report on his secure terminal. Even with his top-level clearance, half the technical details were redacted. Something about dark matter weaponization, space-time manipulation, and what the report euphemistically called localized reality restructuring. "Sir," Williams said slowly, "I think we just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. And I'm not sure anyone, including us, understands what that means." 6 months later, Captain Chin stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Nightborne, watching the construction of humanity's first deep space military academy. The facility was being built in orbit around Kepler Colony, the same colony they'd saved from Zephyrian bombardment. It was, the planner said, symbolically appropriate. "Captain," Dr. Webb joined her at the viewport, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want to see the latest intelligence reports." Chin accepted the coffee gratefully. "Good news or terrifying news?" "Both, as usual." Webb activated his data pad. "The Zephyrian Empire has officially disbanded its military. They're transitioning to what they're calling a peaceful research confederation." "And the terrifying news?" "Every major power in the galaxy is now trying to develop dark matter weapons. So far, 12 species have had accidents during testing. The Altarian homeworld is now surrounded by a permanent gravity well, the Rigel colonies exist in temporal flux, and the less said about what happened to the Proximan research station, the better." Chin nodded. They'd created a new arms race, and humanity was the only species that had actually succeeded in weaponizing forces that could rewrite reality itself. "There's more," Webb continued. "The Galactic Council is proposing new warfare conventions. Specifically, a complete ban on what they're calling ontological weapons, anything that can alter the fundamental nature of spacetime." "And our response?" Webb smiled. Ambassador Williams suggested they might want to focus on making sure no one threatens human civilians instead of trying to regulate our defensive capabilities. Through the viewport, Chin could see the steady stream of alien vessels arriving at the Academy construction site. Not warships, research vessels, diplomatic transports, and what appeared to be gift-bearing trade convoys. "You know what the strangest part is?" Chin mused. "We never wanted to be the scary ones. We just wanted to protect our people." "Maybe that's why we're scary," Webb replied. Most species develop weapons to conquer or control. We develop them to protect. And now everyone's trying to figure out what humans might do if someone really, truly threatened something we cared about. Chen thought about that, watching as another alien delegation's ship requested permission to dock. The universe had learned a simple lesson in the Kepler system. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make sure the fight never happened again. Late at night, in command centers across the galaxy, military strategists stare at star charts and ask themselves the same question. If humans could do that to protect 30,000 civilians, what would they do to protect 30 billion? The Nightborne still patrols the outer systems, its dark matter cascade generators humming quietly in the depths of space. Captain Chen and her crew have become legends. The humans who ended a war in 5 minutes and created a peace that no one dares break. But here's the thing that really keeps alien commanders awake at night. The Nightborne isn't humanity's most advanced ship anymore. It's just the first. And somewhere in the deep black of space, construction yards are building vessels with names like Erebus, Nemesis, and Judgment Day, ships designed by a species that turned theoretical physics into a weapon and called it Tuesday. The galaxy learned something important that day in the Kepler system. Humans aren't dangerous because they're naturally violent or inherently warlike. They're dangerous because when you threaten what they love, they don't just fight back. They innovate. And in a universe where the laws of physics are more like suggestions, that's the most terrifying thing of all. 6 months after the Kepler incident, that's what the history books would call it, though the day physics had a nervous breakdown was Captain Chen's personal favorite. Humanity was dealing with a problem they'd never expected: success. The UES Nightborne drifted through the Vega system, its dark matter generators humming with barely contained power. Around them, space traffic moved with the nervous efficiency of pedestrians walking past a sleeping tiger. Cargo ships took detours that added weeks to their journeys just to avoid getting too close to the human vessel. Diplomatic convoys sent formal requests for safe passage protocols before entering the same star system. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez called from his station. "We're receiving another surrender." Chen looked up from her coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic stuff most ships carried. Being humanity's most feared warship came with certain perks. Who is it this time? The hegemony of Keth. Apparently, they heard we were conducting routine patrols in their sector and decided to preemptively capitulate. Rodriguez paused. They're offering tribute in the form of rare minerals and what their message describes as, "Please don't unmake our reality." Dr. Webb snorted from his science station. "We're not even in their sector. We're 3 systems away." "Apparently that's too close for comfort," Rodriguez replied. Chen sighed. This was the 15th unsolicited surrender they'd received this week. The galactic community had developed what psychologists were calling Nightborne syndrome, a collective anxiety disorder triggered by the mere possibility of human military intervention. It was flattering in a deeply disturbing way. "Draft a standard response," Chen ordered. "Thank them for their offer, remind them that we're not at war with anyone, and suggest they use their tribute money to improve their civilian infrastructure instead." "Should I include the usual disclaimer about not threatening human colonies?" "Always. But here's where things get interesting. Fear, it turns out, is a hell of a motivator." The Zephyrian Empire, once the galaxy's primary military power, had transformed itself into the Zephyrian Research Confederation practically overnight. Their former military bases were now peaceful research stations. Their dreadnoughts had been converted into hospital ships. Their planet cracker missiles were being retrofitted into asteroid mining equipment. It was, by all accounts, a miraculous transformation from warlike empire to scientific utopia. The problem was nobody believed it was genuine. Intelligence reports coming in from Sector Command, Communications Officer Park announced. The Zephyrians aren't just researching peaceful applications of their technology. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Oh, they're apparently trying to develop time travel capabilities. The working theory is that they want to go back and prevent the Kepler incident from ever happening." Dr. Webb looked up sharply. "Time travel? Do they have any idea how catastrophically dangerous that could be?" "Probably not," Chen mused. But then again, 6 months ago, most of the galaxy thought dark matter weapons were impossible. The truth was, the Nightborne's victory had created a technological arms race unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every major power was desperately trying to develop weapons that could match human capabilities. So far, the results had been spectacular failures. The Altarian Confederacy had managed to create a gravity weapon that worked perfectly. Unfortunately, it had also created a permanent black hole in their test system. The entire Altair colony fleet was now trapped in a stable orbit around an artificial singularity, sending regular reports that basically amounted to "send help, we're stuck in spacetime." The Rigel Syndicate had attempted to weaponize quantum entanglement and had somehow managed to scatter their entire research team across parallel dimensions. Occasionally, they'd receive messages from alternate versions of their scientists, usually saying things like, "Don't try the quantum cascade, it turns everyone into energy beings," or "The universe where math doesn't work sends its regards." And then there was the Proximate incident, which the Galactic Council had classified at a level so secret that even thinking about it required a security clearance. "You know what the real problem is?" Chen said to Dr. Webb during their weekly chess game in the observation lounge. "We're too good at our job." Webb moved his knight, contemplating the board. "How so?" "Look around." Chen gestured at the peaceful star field outside. "When was the last time we had to actually do anything? Everyone's so scared of us that they're solving their own problems rather than risk getting our attention." It was true. Piracy in human-claimed space had dropped to zero. Territorial disputes were being resolved through arbitration rather than warfare. Even the notorious Orion slave traders had officially disbanded their organization and started a legitimate shipping company called Definitely Not Slavers Express. "The Galactic Peace Index is at an all-time high," Webb agreed. "Crime rates are down across 17 sectors. Even the usually aggressive mantid swarms have started sending us birthday cards." Chen captured Webb's bishop with her rook. "We've accidentally created galactic peace through the threat of existential horror. I'm not sure if we should be proud or terrified. Can we be both?" Before Chen could answer, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain to the bridge." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of barely contained excitement. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. Code Black." Chen and Webb exchanged glances. Code Black meant one of three things: imminent alien invasion, discovery of a galaxy-threatening anomaly, or the kind of political crisis that made seasoned diplomats consider career changes. The secure communication chamber aboard the Nightborne was designed to handle the most classified transmissions in human space. Quantum encryption, temporal shielding, and what the manual euphemistically called reality stabilizers ensured that no alien intelligence service could intercept their conversations. The holographic image of Secretary General Harrison materialized in the chamber, looking like a man who'd been dealing with cosmic-level problems before his morning coffee. "Captain Chen," Harrison began without preamble, "we have a situation." "Sir?" "The Galactic Council is requesting a formal demonstration of human military capabilities." Chen blinked. "They want us to show off?" "In a manner of speaking." Harrison's expression suggested this was not a request he was comfortable making. Specifically, they want proof that humanity possesses military technologies beyond the Nightborne's dark matter cascade. "Why?" Harrison paused, the kind of pause that preceded either very good news or the end of civilization as they knew it. "Because 3 new species have entered the galaxy from the outer rim, and they're not impressed by our reputation." The holographic display shifted, showing sensor readings from the galactic edge. 3 massive fleets, each composed of ships that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian dreadnoughts, were moving through previously unexplored space with the confidence of apex predators. The hegemony of Vor, the Crimson Tide Collective, and something that calls itself the Final Dominion, Harrison continued. "They've been monitoring galactic communications for months, and they've concluded that humanity's victory over the Zephyrians was a fluke." "A fluke?" Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Their exact words, according to our xenolinguist team, translate roughly to primitive mammals playing with forces they don't understand. They're demanding tribute from all galactic civilizations, including us." Chin felt something cold and unpleasant settle in her stomach. Tribute? 50% of our industrial output, half our population, 4 labor assignments, and complete access to our military technologies. Harrison's jaw tightened. They've given us 30 days to comply. Which brings us to how Captain Sarah Chin found herself standing in the Galactic Council's main assembly hall, watching 3 of the galaxy's most powerful new threats take their seats at the diplomatic table. The Vor representative was a creature that looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a crystalline structure and then given it delusions of godhood. It spoke in subsonic rumbles that made the station's hull vibrate and caused several smaller species to evacuate their bladders involuntarily. The Crimson Tide delegate was worse, a writhing mass of what appeared to be living metal that constantly shifted between different configurations, occasionally forming what might have been faces just long enough to leer at the other representatives. But the final Dominion's ambassador was the real nightmare. It looked almost human, which somehow made it infinitely more unsettling. 2 perfect features, eyes that reflected light in ways that hurt to look at, and a smile that suggested it found the entire concept of diplomacy amusing. The human representative will now present evidence of their military capabilities, the council speaker announced, its translation device struggling with the ambient fear in the chamber. Ambassador Williams stood at the human podium, looking remarkably calm for a man who was essentially being asked to threaten 3 galactic superpowers. Honored delegates, he began, humanity prefers diplomatic solutions to conflict. The Vor representative's subsonic laughter made several viewports crack. However, Williams continued, activating the main holographic display, we are prepared to defend ourselves and our allies if necessary. The display showed the Kepler system as it existed today, or rather, as it didn't exist. Where the Zephyrian Third Fleet had been, spacetime still wore thin, marked by navigation beacons that warned ships to avoid the area unless they wanted to experience several dimensions simultaneously. This, Williams said calmly, was accomplished by one of our older vessels using defensive technologies. The final Dominion's ambassador leaned forward, its too perfect smile never wavering. Impressive, it said in a voice like silk over steel. But we have studied this anomaly. It required precise conditions, specific targeting, and considerable preparation time. Our fleets number in the thousands. We do not obligingly form perfect formations for your convenience. Williams nodded. That's an excellent point. Captain Chin, would you care to respond? Chin stepped forward, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. You're absolutely right, she said to the final Dominion's ambassador. The Kepler demonstration did require very specific conditions. The alien delegates relaxed slightly, apparently satisfied that they'd successfully called humanity's bluff. So we built something better, Chin continued. The main display shifted, showing the Nightborne in high orbit above the assembly station. The sleek black vessel looked almost peaceful against the star field, its dark matter generators cycling at minimal power. Dr. Webb, Chin said into her communicator, initiate Omega Protocol. Demonstration parameters only. From their seats in the gallery, the alien delegates watched as the space around the Nightborne began to change. Reality bent and twisted, but not in the localized, targeted way it had at Kepler. This was different. Bigger. Worse. A sphere of altered spacetime began expanding outward from the human vessel, growing with the inexorable patience of a cancer. Inside the sphere, the laws of physics became negotiable. Light bent in impossible curves. Gravity flowed like water. Time hiccuped and skipped like a scratched recording. The Omega Protocol, Chin explained conversationally, doesn't require specific targeting or formation flying. It simply expands until we tell it to stop. Current expansion rate is approximately 1 light minute per second. The mathematical implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. At that rate, the effect would reach the assembly station in roughly 8 minutes. It would encompass entire star systems in hours. Left unchecked, it could theoretically consume the galaxy in a matter of months. Of course, Chin continued, this is just the demonstration setting. We've never tested it at full power. Make it stop. The Crimson Tide delegate's metallic voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry? Make it stop. The living metal creature was writhing in what appeared to be existential terror. Chin glanced at her chronometer. Dr. Webb, initiate protocol shutdown. Return spacetime to standard parameters. The expanding sphere of altered reality collapsed back on itself like a soap bubble popping in reverse. Within seconds, space returned to its normal, predictable, physics-obeying state. The silence in the assembly chamber was profound. Now then, Williams said, straightening his tie with the casual air of a man who just demonstrated humanity's ability to delete entire star systems. I believe there was some discussion about tribute payments. The Vor representative had stopped making any sound at all. Its crystalline structure had gone completely dark, a sign that xenobiologists recognized as either deep meditation or catatonic shock. The final Dominion's ambassador had lost its perfect smile. For the first time since entering the chamber, it looked genuinely uncertain. That was not possible. Our scientists confirmed that such widespread reality manipulation would require energy output equivalent to stellar ignition. Yes, Chin agreed. It does. The implications of that simple statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity had not only developed weapons that could rewrite physics, they had developed weapons that consumed the power output of entire stars and somehow made it portable. We should reconsider our tribute requirements, the Crimson Tide delegate managed. That's very considerate of you, Williams replied. However, I think there may be some confusion about the nature of tribute in this relationship. He activated another display, showing the outer rim territories where the 3 new fleets had originated. These sectors contain approximately 40 billion sentient beings across 200 inhabited worlds. They are now under the protection of the Terran Republic and its allies. The final Dominion's ambassador found its voice. You cannot simply claim. We're not claiming anything, Williams interrupted gently. We're offering protection. Free of charge. No tribute required. The only condition is that all military activities in those sectors cease immediately. And if we refuse? Williams glanced at Chin, who shrugged. Then I guess we'll have to demonstrate what the Omega Protocol looks like when we're not feeling charitable. What followed was the fastest military withdrawal in galactic history. The hegemony of Vor's 1,000-ship armada departed the galaxy entirely, sending a final transmission that roughly translated to, "We will go find a universe where mathematics is less terrifying." The Crimson Tide Collective disbanded into individual components that scattered across 17 different dimensions, occasionally sending messages that amounted to, "We're sorry we bothered you. Please don't turn us into geometric abstractions." The final Dominion's fleet simply vanished. No hyperspace signatures, no energy readings, nothing. They either developed instantaneous faster-than-light travel or decided that existing in the same reality as humanity was an unacceptable risk. 3 days later, Chin stood on the Nightborne's observation deck, watching construction crews from a dozen different species working together to build what would become the galaxy's first truly international research station. The Zephyrians were contributing their expertise in plasma physics, the Altarians were providing gravitational manipulation technology from their new base around the artificial black hole they'd accidentally created, and the Rigel Syndicate was offering insights gleaned from their scattered parallel dimension existence. "You know," Dr. Webb said, joining her at the viewport, "I'm starting to think we might actually pull this off." Pull what off? Galactic peace. Real peace, not just the too terrified to fight kind. Chin considered this, watching as a Mantid engineering team worked alongside human technicians to install what appeared to be a quantum stability matrix. 6 months ago, the Mantids had been one of the galaxy's most aggressive species. Now they were sending their best engineers to help build humanity's research projects. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe we've just convinced everyone that cooperation is safer than competition. Is there a difference?" Chin smiled, thinking about the question that had been keeping her awake at night. They'd set out to protect human colonies and had accidentally become the galaxy's unwitting peacekeepers. They developed weapons capable of rewriting reality and were using them to build research stations and defend shipping lanes. Somewhere in the depths of space, construction yards were building the next generation of human vessels, ships with names like Prometheus, Pandora, and Schrodinger's cat. Each one more advanced than the last, each one capable of doing things that would have been considered impossible just a year ago. But here's the thing that still keeps Chin awake at night, staring out at the stars and wondering what they've unleashed. They'd created weapons that could unmake reality itself, and they were using them to protect and build rather than destroy. They'd accidentally terrified the galaxy into peace and were now working to make that peace sustainable through cooperation rather than fear. The universe had learned that humanity was dangerous not because they were naturally violent, but because they would rewrite the laws of physics rather than let innocence die. But what happens when a species that can casually manipulate the fundamental forces of reality gets really, truly creative about building instead of destroying? The research station taking shape outside the Nightborne's viewport was just the beginning. Humanity was already talking about projects that would have sounded like fantasy a year ago. Artificial pocket universes for dangerous experiments, time-locked laboratories where centuries of research could be conducted in days, and what one particularly ambitious physicist had dubbed universe patches. Small sections of reality with different physical laws, customized for specific scientific purposes. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, "we're receiving a priority message from the new research station. They're requesting permission to begin phase 1 of what they're calling the Reality Engineering Project." Chin exchanged glances with Dr. Webb. Phase 1 of what now? Apparently, they want to create a small pocket dimension where they can safely test theoretical physics without risking our universe, Rodriguez continued. They're saying it's completely safe and that the worst-case scenario is just the creation of a parallel reality where the laws of physics are more fun. Chin rubbed her temples. Define more fun. Gravity works in reverse on Tuesdays, time flows backward during leap years, and mathematical constants are determined by popular vote. Late at night, in research labs across human space, scientists stare at equations that would have been impossible 6 months ago and ask themselves a simple question. If we can rewrite reality to protect what we love, what else can we build? The Nightborne continues its patrols, its crew now serving as much as explorers and protectors as warriors. Captain Chin has become something she never expected, the guardian of a peace built not on fear, but on the universe's growing understanding that humanity's true power isn't destruction. It's imagination. And in a galaxy where the laws of physics are more like suggestions, that might just be the most beautiful thing of all. The war ended with silence. The peace began with a question.